Hey all, JTC here, and welcome to a different kind of video from the videos I normally make. It's no secret that there are some things in Vermintide that need buffs, some things that need nerfs, and some things that just need reworks. So today we're going to be going over kind of the entire game, and I'm going to be giving my opinions on what needs buffs, what needs nerfs, and what needs reworks. We're going to be starting with characters and careers, then we're going to be moving to weapons, and then finally we'll be talking about just kind of some general changes that I think should be made to Vermintide. So we'll be starting with Kruber and going through all of Kruber's careers, and then we'll move down the list and then go on from there. But first, we're going to start with Merc. I only think one thing needs a rework for Merc, and that is On Your Feet Mates. On Your Feet Mates is what I like to call a noob trap, because it seems to be really, really good on paper, but in practice, it's actually really, really bad for three main reasons. One, if your team is not aware that you're running On Your Feet Mates, they're not going to be prepared for the res, and they're going to pretty much die every single time. Two, I actually made a chart for this, so let me pull this up. So the red circle is Kruber, the black is the shout radius, and the blue is the On Your Feet radius. For those that don't know, the actual res radius for On Your Feet is larger than the shout radius of Kruber's base shout, which means it's possible to get someone's pinky toe with the shout with the On Your Feet radius and get them up, but everything around them will not be staggered, which means you end up, even if they're prepared, you will end up rezzing them into a horde that's just going to instantly kill them again. So the only way you can actually get value from this perk is by being directly next to them, by, getting them up when everything is staggered. But that's what you should be doing with the perk anyway. You should be going up to them, shouting to stagger everything, and then just getting them up yourself. And then the third reason is that a lot of Krubers tend to hold this perk, and at that point you basically just lack an entire ultimate ability, because Krubers will never ever use this until someone goes down, because they want to get that On Your Feet value mates. On your feet mates value. I said that weird. And that ends up being really detrimental to the team, because Mercenary Kruber's ult is incredibly powerful. It's very, very good, so you should be spamming it as much as you can. And the fact that people just hold it to get this perk some value is not great, which is why I would rework it to this. On Your Feet Mate no longer automatically revives knocked down allies, but it now instead has a 15% increased radius, and anyone who is caught in the radius who is downed gains complete invulnerability from all damage sources for 5 seconds. This way, you can actually get some value out of the perk. It'll buy some down teammates some time, so if you need some extra time to get to them, they're actually going to get that time. After that, we will move on to Huntsman. I think Huntsman needs a complete rework from the ground up. If you don't know why, I would recommend you go watch my career tier list video. I explain it why in there, but I'm not going to go over it again this time. But the problem is I don't really know how to rework Huntsman, so I don't really have too much to say about Huntsman, but I do have something to say about Waste Not, Want Not. I think Waste Not, Want Not is a really, really good passive perk, but it's super, super boring. So I personally would rework it to something else completely. I would rework it to a new passive in which every 3 headshots you get, they don't have to be in a row, they can be separate, but every 3 headshots you get makes the next body shot you get count as a headshot instead, for all intents and purposes. This way, it would actually work on with his level 20 talents, so you could proc level 20 talents from this, and you could also proc other things like Scrounger or Conservative Shooter from it. I think that would give Huntsman a more interesting mechanic to work with, and not a more interesting passive ability to work with, and not something as boring as this. Foot Knight, I think, is fine. Grail Knight, I would personally work Virtue of the... How the fuck do you say this? I don't know how to say it, so we're just going to say this one, the middle one. I would rework this personally to... Some people might disagree with this, but I think it would be cool to see, instead of a Blessed Blade that he summons a Blessed Spear that he throws. So the middle one would replace this with a spear that he can throw, which would actually give him some ranged options. Moving on down to Ranger Veteran, I think that ingenious improvisation is a little too underwhelming, and I would personally rework it so that instead of just a 10% base chance to not consume an item, whenever you play as Ranger Veteran, whenever you spawn into a map, you gain two random items, two random items, period, end of story. It could be any kind of bomb, any kind of potion, and any kind of healing. So you could spawn in the map with a healing potion and a fire bomb. You could spawn in with a speed potion and a normal bomb. You could spawn in with a med kit and a speed potion. It's completely random, but whenever you start, you get two random things, which I think would be really, really cool. I don't have anything for Ironbreaker. I don't have anything for Slayer. Slayer's in a pretty okay place in my opinion right now. Engineer, I would change two things about Engie. I would increase his base HP from 100 to 125 because he definitely needs that boost. And then next, I actually saw this recommendation on Reddit, which I really liked. I would replace Utility Belt because right now, Utility Belt is a very, very selfish passive that doesn't really benefit Engineer much unless he's running Bombardier. But let's be real, most people run a Blade of Armor because he desperately needs the damage reduction. So other than Bombardier, there is no reason for you to give the Outcast Engineer so many bombs. He doesn't do anything special with it other than that one talent. So it should be replaced, in my opinion, with every 2 minutes, he creates a random bomb in his inventory, or if he already has one, he drops it on the ground. Similar to the Grail Knight Strength Potion quest, but instead of, having to do something, you just passively create a bomb every 2 minutes. Next up is Waystalker, who is in a really, really good spot right now, but she does need a rework on Ricochet, because Ricochet is just absolute trash, and it should never be used ever, which is why I would replace it with an increase in ranged attack speed by 10, 15, or 20%. Admittedly, it's not a very good talent, but it is admittedly much better than Ricochet. Handmaiden is fine. Shade does need a change in either Cloak of Mist or Vanish, because when you combine these two talents, it's kind of like the Lingering Flames, Famished Flames thing for Battle Wizard. When you run only one of them, it's not that bad, but when you mix both of them, it becomes insanely, insanely overpowered. So personally, I would nerf Vanish so that it can only proc every 2 seconds. It still keeps the same effect that it has right now, but it can only proc once every 2 seconds, which means it would be harder to keep up constant procs of Vanish, but if you are actually quite skilled with it, you can still do it. After that, we are going to move on to Sister of the Thorn. Oh boy, Sister of the Thorn. First off, I think Radiant Inheritance should be nerfed even farther. I don't know exactly how to nerf Radiant Inheritance, but I do think that Radiant Inheritance should get another nerf, because it is still way too powerful. I believe that, which one? Doomsight? The critical hits for Doomsight should be capped to 6 critical hits, because right now there is no cap on critical strikes, so if you just end up saving them, or like drinking a conch potion, or someone drinks a conch potion, or you get a bunch of characters and careers on your team who have really low career cooldown, and they just spam them for you, you're going to have, like 20 or 30 crits stacked up, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So in my opinion, this should be capped at a maximum of 6 crits. And then, what was the other thing that I had? I would personally replace Ironbark Thicket. I would rework Ironbark Thicket to be something else, because right now, Blood Razor and Black Venom are actually both pretty good, but a wall on its own that does absolutely nothing is actually very detrimental to your team, especially since it only lasts for 10 seconds. So personally, I would rework it to something called Ghost Wall, or Ghost Thicket, or Wraith Thicket, or something like that. And what this talent would do is it would change the thicket. What is it called? It's called Thornwake. It would change the Thornwake wall to be completely transparent. So you could still see where it is, and you can see through it. And it also allows ranged characters to shoot through it. So it would allow anything ranged to pass through the wall with nothing stopping it. And it would also allow you to perfectly see through it. Now, to be clear, enemies would still be stopped by the wall, and archers and Rattling gunners would also have their projectiles still stopped by the wall, but it would only allow you and your team to shoot through the wall, which I think would add a lot more value to this perk and actually, make it compete with these other two. Witch Hunter Captain is next. Really the only... Witch Hunter Captain's in a very, very good spot right now. Oh, I forgot. I also think that the skill cooldown for Sister of the Thorn should be increased to 50 seconds. That would also be another good nerf for her. Anyway, Witch Hunter Captain, the only thing that needs a change, in my opinion, is I Shall Judge You All, because compared to these two, this one just doesn't compare whatsoever, period. So I would change I Shall Judge You All to a 20 to 25% increased radius of his shout. Done. Next up is Bounty Hunter, who definitely needs a few changes. First, let's talk about Steel Crescendo. Steel Crescendo is bad because it only procs whenever Bounty Hunter is completely out of ammo. It's essentially the same thing as Ranger Vet's Last Resort, but it gives less of a power increase and it's timed. So it needs a rework to be better. You could basically change it to just be Last Resort but on Bounty Hunter, but I think that's really boring. So I personally would change it to it procs whenever Victor fires the last shot in his clip. So technically, if you were to shoot with a crossbow, it would proc after every single time you shoot your crossbow because there's only one bolt in his clip, and it would, proc for the last ammunition in his clip across all of his weapons. But I would lower the attack speed and the power gain to 10% for 10 seconds instead of 15 seconds. Let's talk about now Just Reward. Just Reward should be reworked because, once more, it doesn't compete. Double Shotted, just Double Shotted is an absolute powerhouse of a career, or of a talent, which means that both Just Reward and Indiscriminate Blast both need to be changed in order to bring it up to the speed of Double Shotted. I would change Just Reward to kind of be more like this isn't a very good change, but it would be more fun. So I would change it to have a modifier of a minus 40% power on it, as opposed to just, the normal ult or Double Shotted. But you have three separate shots to make instead of only one. So this does mean that you would be able to kill, 3 Chaos Warriors, or, snipe 3 specials from a distance. And I think it should also kind of be like Battle Wizard's Burnout, so that whenever you activate it for the first time, it consumes one of the ammunition, and then you have another 2 ults that you can use for, 20 seconds or something before it times out. And then for Indiscriminate Blast, I would make 2 changes to it. I would give Indiscriminate Blast a much, much higher cleave. It should be able to cleave through a lot more because it's basically the most powerful shotgun in the game, or it should be. And I would also make it do more damage to monsters and armor in this way. For those that don't know, back when Vermintide first released, Bluntsman was one of the most powerful careers because monsters did not have any passive resistance. Monsters and armor did not have any passive resistance to any kind of shotguns. So you were able to absolutely delete bosses, including like Rasknit and armored units, with the blunderbuss in the blink of an eye. So in order to counteract this, Fat Shark gave all creatures who are considered monster, as well as armored units, a passive damage resistance to all shotguns in the game. I believe that this should be ignored specifically for Indiscriminate Blast, considering it is an ultimate ability. That way, it would actually, to be able to do very decent monster damage, not as much as Double Shotted, obviously, but it still would be able to, keep up, at least to some regard, with Double Shotted, and it would still be able to actually kill armored units. Zealot, much like Huntsman, needs a complete rework from the ground up, but once more, I'm not completely sure with how to do it, so I don't have much to say. But what I would also change the passive ability for Zealot, and I do have an idea on how to do that. I would change the passive ability for, instead of gaining power for missing health, Victor would basically gain increased power, attack speed, and movement speed every time he gets hit for X amount of seconds. Obviously, all of that is subject to change, but at the very base, I believe that he should be rewarded for trading hits and gain a boost or a temporary buff whenever he takes a hit instead of, just passively missing health. Battle Wizard. Battle Wizard definitely needs a few changes. I also think her skill cooldown should be increased from 40 seconds to 50 seconds because she is absolutely crazy. And I do think that little nerf will help bring her in line with a bunch of with the other two Sienna careers. Because right now, Pyro and Unchained, they're not bad, but they definitely fall behind Battle Wizard. So increasing her skill cooldown will help kind of bring her in line with the other two. Famished Flames should be deleted. It is way, way, way too powerful for what it does, and it just completely trivializes the other Sienna careers. This is one I don't know what to replace it with, but I think Famished Flames should be deleted and replaced with something completely new. What is the other thing? Lingering Flames should be changed so that the minimum damage it does is capped, so it's not the absolute minimum damage of a fire dot. It's, a slightly above the absolute minimum damage, because the problem with Lingering Flames is that the absolute minimum damage for some staffs is absolutely garbage. I'm gonna link or show here on screen right now a clip from Wet Magic where it specifically shows the damage numbers with Lingering Flames on, and it's absolutely pathetic. I think it's like a fourth of a damage, 0.25. It's absolutely garbage. So capping that to something slightly above minimum would help this talent out immensely. And lastly, I would replace Centered. I would replace this, because as of right now, Unusually Calm is just straight up better than Centered in every way, shape, or form. 3 seconds as opposed to 6 seconds is just a lot better. So personally, I would replace Centered with this. Every 2 seconds you do not cast or charge a spell, the next spell that you cast has plus 2% attack speed and plus 5% power, which stacks up to 5 times. This way, you would be able to, get extra use out of things like Bolt Staff and Fireball Staff, and that would, I feel like, help a lot with, especially with, like Fireball Staff. I don't think there's any problem with Unchained, so the last one we're going to talk about is Pyro. First off, I think Valen's Doctrine should be base kit, not completely, because the Valen's Doctrine is the same thing as Slave to Akshi, no overcharge slowdown. So I think the Valen's Doctrine should be removed from the talent tree, replaced with something else, and added to base kit at about 50% efficiency. So it shouldn't be complete immune to overcharge slowdown like Unchained, but it should be partial. I will admit I don't know what to replace Valen's Doctrine with. I can't think of anything like that, so I don't have anything for that. I would personally replace Exhaust with an increased crit chance for 10 seconds after casting, because there really is no reason to, exhaust your overcharge. Because with Pyro, it's not like Unchained where you're at a risk of dying from getting hit, so there's no reason to really need to vent. It's just kind of detrimental, because you definitely need that attack speed and that extra crit chance in order to stay alive as Pyro, especially if you're in a bad situation. So I just find that Exhaust is detrimental most of the time, which is why increasing the an increased crit chance instead with Exhaust for 10 seconds would just be much better. And then lastly, Soul Siphon is not good. It could be better, which is why I think it should be the equivalent of Huntsman's. Where is it? Thick Hide. It should be the equivalent of Huntsman, in which that, whenever you kill a special or elite enemy, you take reduced damage, which stacks up to 4 times, and getting hit removes a stack. Pyro's is basically the same thing, except that it stacks only up to 3 times, and it's timed. I don't think it should be timed. I think it should be exactly like Huntsman's, and it should only be removed whenever you eat a hit. And next up, we have changes to weapons in Vermintide. First up, Barden's throwing axes. Give them a melee attack on left click and give them a better throwing arc on right click. Basically, bring them up to the speed of the Briar Javelin, because the Briar Javelin, as of right now, is just better in every way than the throwing axe. So the throwing axe needs to be brought up to the level of the Briar Javelin. And speaking of these two weapons, this is probably not going to be a very popular idea of mine, but I still believe it. The ammo capacity of the throwing axe and the javelins should be increased significantly. I'm talking like triple or quadruple what they have right now. But you should be unable to gain back the ammunition from it by holding R. You can still walk around and pick them up from walls or enemies, and you can now be able to gain back ammo through ammo boxes and ammo bags, but if you throw a javelin or a throwing axe off a cliff, that one's gone permanently. And the reason I say this is because we're getting to a point where a lot of ranged weapons in Vermintide don't require ammo. A lot of recent ranged weapons that Fat Shark has released do not require ammo, and we're starting to get to the point where ammo is not a problem anymore. And because Vermintide is a melee-focused game with melee combat at the forefront, the fact that ammo isn't a problem anymore is an issue, in my opinion. And these changes would kind of rein it back in just a little bit. It wouldn't fix it completely, but it would make it more tolerable, in my opinion at least. Next up, Moonbow. The Moonbow is a little too powerful right now, in my opinion, and it should receive only a single nerf, which I think would bring it more in line, or pretty much perfectly in line, in my opinion. And that should be that the rate at which the dot of the Moonbow ticks should be reduced slightly. I don't believe the damage of the Moonbow itself should be touched. I think the damage of it currently is fine, but I think the rate at which the dot ticks should be reduced slightly so that the bow is not as strong. And my reasoning for this is by reducing the rate of fire, or the rate at which the dot ticks, but not touching the damage, you do bring the damage of the Moonbow down a little bit, while also making for more interesting gameplay. Because right now, all you need to do is shoot an enemy once with Moonbow, and then you forget about them, because they're going to die from the dot. However, with this change, you could still do that, but it would take a little bit of extra time. And at that point, the thought that would cross your mind would be, okay, I could either only do one shot on the special, to which they're going to be up for, 5 to 6 seconds instead of only 2 to 3, and they could potentially pose a more deadly threat to my team, or I could instead just shoot him twice and instead kill him in 2 to 3 seconds instead. But that would, increase the use of the Moonfire Bow, or increase the ammo use of the Moonfire Bow and make it a little less effective in the long run. The Elven Axe should have its power increased slightly because it does need a little bit of help. The Great Axe for Barden should have its heavy attack speed increased by 5%. And then Salta's Flail, because it's not as good as Sienna's Flail, should receive a boost to its cleave power and attack speed. And then lastly, let's talk about the Flamestorm Staff for Sienna. Right now, the Flamestorm Staff on Sienna is basically just a reskin of the Drake Fire Gun, and because of that, I think it needs a complete rework, because having 2 flamethrowers is just really, really boring. So this is my idea on how to change the Flamestorm Staff. The left click of the staff would turn into our first iteration of an actual melee attack with the staff. You left click and Sienna unleashes a fire whip in front of her. Every time you left click, the overcharge meter does go up slightly. For every the more enemies you cleave through, the higher your overcharge goes up. But every single time you hit an enemy, it does stagger them considerably and applies a semi-hefty dot to them. And then for the right click, whenever you hold down the right mouse button, you begin drawing kind of like a line on the ground that goes until your overcharge can't handle it anymore. And then at that point, when you let go of the right mouse button, a geyser of flame shoots up beginning where you started drawing and will continue along the path that you drew until finally it gets to where it ended. Before the geyser hits a specific area, there's nothing really going on there. There's kind of like glowing cracks on the ground to signify that a geyser is going to come up there soon. If you walk over it or an enemy walks over it, nothing will happen. But after the geyser has already come up, then there will be kind of a line of fire on the ground that will apply a semi-hefty dot to enemies who walk through it. If an enemy is hit by an actual geyser eruption itself, they are affected with the heaviest stagger possible, as in a Foot Knight charge stagger. So it will knock Chaos Warriors on their asses, and it will send, normal troops flying. The actual damage of the geyser itself is decently low, and the dot that it applies is not that strong, to compensate for the massive amount of stagger that it will do. And then here are just some general changes that I would make to Vermintide. First up, I think this one goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Copy-paste the Athanor crafting from Weaves to base game. Please, for the love of Sigmar, let us choose what we actually want to roll on our weapons and jewelry, rather than leaving it up to RNG. Please. All movement abilities should count as dodges. All movement abilities includes the ones from Battle Wizard, Slayer, Foot Knight, Handmaiden, Zealot, and any others that I'm forgetting. But right now, they do not count as dodges, which means that you do sometimes get hit in the middle of your teleport or your jump or your dash. Changing them to be considered dodges would allow that problem to basically just go away completely. It was originally... they did originally count as dodges, but now they don't for some reason, but they should go back to counting as dodges. The plus Berserker should be removed from the property pool and be added to shields by default, like plus 10 or plus 20%. Right now, plus Berserker is a useless property to have on any jewelry or any weapon in the game, period, end of story, except for shields, because being able to use a shield to actually stagger monks and berserkers mid-flurry is actually pretty nice, and because of that, berserkers should be added to shields passively so that they can have that passively, but otherwise should be just completely removed from the game, because there's no reason to ever take plus berserker on anything other than a shield. Let's talk about heal share real quickly. The heal share talent is a good idea in theory, but in practice it's really, really bad, because if you ever want to choose heal share, you have to take away your ability to gain temp HP, and Vermintide is just built around temp HP, and lacking temp HP, it doesn't matter if you're brand new to the game or you're a 5,000 hour veteran, not having temp HP feels absolutely awful. So in my opinion, heal share should be removed from the talent tree and replaced with another temp HP ability, so that no matter what, you're always going to have temporary HP, and heal share should then be moved to a necklace trait for the necklace, obviously, so that you can roll it instead of bar skin or boon of Shalia, but you would be able to still have heal share. Speaking of traits, I do have a few ideas for a couple of more traits. A couple of bomb traits would be a reduced friendly fire bomb trait, where whenever you have this trait on, you would do like 80% less damage to your team, 80% less friendly fire damage to your team through bombs, which would kind of remove the entire problem of bombing your team with like a strength bomb. It would basically negate that completely. A trait that would increase the time it would take to actually light and throw a bomb, but it would increase the power of the bomb by, say, 10-20%. And then another one that would go not on the trinket, but on the charm, an increased consumable speed trait. So whenever you ran this trait, you would consume all potions, speed, conk, strength, as well as healing potions by like 20 or 30%. So you'd actually be able to down those a lot faster. And then finally, the deed system in the game is good, but it needs to be expanded upon, and I think there should be a deed crafting / scrapping system that should be in the game. So if you were to take a deed and then scrap it, you would have a chance of getting any number of modifiers back. So if I were to scrap a Send in the Next Wave, Nurgle's Rot, Harder Better deed, I would have a chance to get all three, but I might get a Nurgle's Rot modifier and a Send in the Next Wave modifier. And then at that point, what I can do is I can expend some of my dust or scrap in order to craft a brand new deed, or hell, even just add a new resource, paper, that you get when you scrap deeds. And then at that point you can expend that paper, and then you can say, okay, I want to make a deed that has Send in the Next Wave, Nurgle's Rot, and Deprivation. And then at that point you put all those together, you click craft, and boom, you have a deed that has all of those modifiers that you want to play.